Japan. For centuries, mornings in this country began with the rising steam of green tea. Tea was not just a beverage, it was a symbol of patience, aesthetics, and simplicity. The soft sound of a bamboo whisk spinning in a quiet room. That was the heartbeat of Japan. But today, if you walk the streets of Tokyo, you see a completely different scene. Coffee vending machines on every corner, young people walking with paper cups, white-collar workers opening canned coffee while waiting for their morning train, and the statistics are striking. Japan is now one of the world's largest coffee importers. Once known as the land of tea, Japan has become a nation that lives on coffee. So how did such a deeply rooted culture change so rapidly? When the calendar hit 1969, a turning point arrived in Japan. A local company called UCC, Ueshima Coffee Company, did something the world had never seen before: canned coffee. It might sound ordinary today, but back then it was revolutionary, because in Japan, coffee was still expensive and consumed like a ritual. But UCC placed it in small metal cans and stocked them in vending machines all across the city. Now you didn't have to go to a cafe to drink coffee. A commuter sprinting to catch the morning train could grab one, just like a factory worker heading to the night shift. Soon, this idea became an entire industry. Brands like Georgia, Coca-Cola, Suntory Boss, Daido entered the market. Each brought a distinct identity: the stern gaze of Tommy Lee Jones on Boss cans, Georgia's working-class slogans, Daido's colorful designs. Coffee was no longer a luxury imported from the West. It became an accessible pause for everyone. Japan's coffee revolution began in tiny metal cans. UCC made coffee portable. But something was still missing: meaning. In 1996, Starbucks stepped into Japan and changed everything. Starbucks wasn't just selling coffee. Dimly lit wooden interiors, soft armchairs, jazz music, seasonal drinks. It wasn't just a place to get a drink anymore. It was a third place. Not home, not work, somewhere in between, where you could freely express your identity. This was enchanting for Japanese youth, because Japanese society was rooted in collective identity, while Starbucks celebrated individuality. Opening your laptop and sitting for hours, sketching dreams into your notebook. Coffee was no longer just caffeine. It was the fuel of creativity. The menu was brilliant too. They created drinks tailored to local tastes: matcha lattes, sakura frappuccinos, nodding to both Japanese aesthetics and Western novelty. This helped coffee stop feeling foreign and start feeling like ours. Soon, local chains followed Starbucks' lead: Tautor, Thales Japan, Excelsior, Pronto. Coffee chains became part of the new social fabric of urban Japanese life. But coffee needed to be more than the drink of today. It had to become the drink of the future. This is where Nescafé entered the stage. There's a famous story in marketing circles. When Nestlé struggled to introduce coffee in Japan, they launched caffeine-free coffee-flavored sweets for children. The idea was simple: to imprint the taste of coffee as a sensory memory. So when those children grew up, the aroma would feel familiar, not foreign. At the same time, the company placed Nescafé machines in offices. Coffee was no longer just an at-home comfort. It became a workplace ritual too. Breakfast, post-lunch meetings, the evening return home. Nescafé's little logo-marked mugs quietly slipped into every part of daily life. This didn't happen through short-term campaigns, but through decades of patient construction. Nescafé carved coffee into the memory of Japanese society. By the 2000s, a new wave rose in Japan, the third wave coffee movement. Now it was no longer just about drinking coffee. It was about understanding its story. Which country grew the beans? Which farmer? How was it roasted, brewed, timed to the second? This curiosity meshed perfectly with Japan's culture of meticulousness. When brands like Blue Bottle Coffee opened in Tokyo, long lines formed. Local micro-roasters multiplied, percent Arabica, verve, glitch. Japanese baristas became world famous. Pour over, siphon, nil, drip. These methods were treated almost like the modern cousins of the tea ceremony. Every drop crafted like a work of art. Meanwhile, European brands like Illy, Lavazza, and Jacobs found their place in the premium market. Italian espresso tradition, German filter habits, Japanese precision. The three fused into a uniquely rich coffee culture. In Japan, the story of a product often begins with its packaging, and coffee was no exception. Georgia, DYDO, and other canned coffees were made to fit perfectly in the hand. Seasonal patterns and limited edition logos appeared on the cans. Some consumers even collected them. Coffee became not just a drink, but an aesthetic experience. Buying, opening, smelling, sipping, all became part of a small personal ritual. You might be wondering, so what happened to tea? Tea is still here, it's still respected, still served ceremonially. But tea symbolizes slowness, and it couldn't keep up with the tempo of modern city life. Coffee, on the other hand, was like fuel that could be consumed quickly. On the morning train, during lunch breaks, in late-night offices, coffee filled the gaps that tea couldn't. Today, while tea consumption per person is falling, coffee consumption has tripled. The younger generation now starts their mornings not with green tea, but with coffee. Coffee has taken root not just on store shelves, but in people's minds. In anime and dramas, cafes became safe harbors where characters paused to think. In films, important dialogues were held over cups of coffee. Coffee stopped being just a taste. It became an image.
Have the large coffee.
Okay, so hot coffee.
Hot coffee.
Okay, room for cream.
Totally leave room for cream.
The big question, why did it happen so fast? The answer is three words: distribution, emotion, design. Distribution, UCC's canned coffee and the vending machine revolution put coffee on every corner. Emotion, Nescafé's taste memory strategy and home office bridge made coffee feel familiar. Design, Starbucks' third place concept and third wave aesthetics made coffee feel aspirational. When these three elements came together, culture shifted. Coffee stopped being foreign and became one of us. There's a popular story on the internet. They used cartoons to introduce coffee to Japanese kids, and when those kids grew up drinking coffee-flavored candy, they became coffee addicts. The truth is more nuanced. Yes, coffee-flavored products were used, but Japan had already known coffee for over a century. Since the early 1900s, Kisaten coffee houses had been part of city culture. The real leap didn't come from one magical ad campaign. It came from decades of small steps. Today, there are already robot baristas making coffee in Japan and automated pour-over machines. By the 2030s, fully sustainable coffee farms are on the agenda. But maybe the most interesting shift will be coffee becoming ceremonial again, just like tea once was, a moment to slow down, pause, and notice. Japan's coffee story is not really about a product. It's the answer to the question, how does culture change? First, you make it accessible. Then you make it familiar. Finally, you make it desirable. UCC made it accessible. Nescafé made it familiar. Starbucks and third wave cafes made it desirable. And together, they blended coffee into the very fabric of a tea nation. Today, a young commuter stands before a vending machine in Japan. The hiss of the metal can opening is like a morning bell. They take a sip, and without even realizing it, they complete the final link in a century-long cultural revolution, because culture is not a statue toppled overnight. It is the sum of countless small stones placed in silence each day. And one day, even if no one remembers who placed them, everyone walks through the building they created.